Da da da! What's my good cheer? Welcome, everybody. Let's give YouTube a couple of minutes, get those notifications out. In the meantime, if you've never popped into one of my lives, I am Cindy. I explore the inside and the outside. And we are back into the heat wave, you guys. It's July. Oh my goodness. July in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. It's really strange, because growing up, I grew up in a household and in a life in actuality in the two extremes, right? I grew up in Vancouver. I came to Winnipeg when I was 18 years old. One of the very best decisions I ever could have made for myself, right? I came with my family. I didn't stay in the household very long, but I wanted to be close to my family. I didn't want to be thousands of miles away from them when they moved here. I had that feeling that maybe I would never see them again. I would never see my father again, who at that time had become so sick that we weren't sure how much time he actually had left. In all honesty, my entire life I had no idea how much time my father had left. But when I was 18, I was moving in with a friend from high school, my very first real friend. And my dad came home. He was a nomad. I went to 11 different elementary schools growing up. It was his thing to buy houses and to sell them for a profit, but it was always within British Columbia. It had never been outside of that province. I'm going to say we traveled all over, but we never purchased land. My father never purchased land anywheres outside of British Columbia. So when he came home that day and said, "We're moving to Manitoba," I was shocked. My system was shocked because I had never been alone before. I had never been isolated outside of my family before. Though my mom's favorite saying was, "I can't wait till the day you turn 18. You're so out of my house." So I knew that when I was 18, I was going to be out of the house. And so I had made plans to move into an apartment with, like I said, my first real best friend, right? In high school that I got introduced to. Well, I knew her throughout the years in high school. I only went to two different high schools, so I had that opportunity to know who she was, but I didn't interact with people. People didn't tend to want to hang out with me, and I was cool with that. The more invisible I could be, the better. And it was really hard for me to be invisible at school. But back to, my parents or my dad coming home from work and just saying, "Oh, we're moving to Manitoba." And like I said, it put me into absolute shock, a little bit of fear, a little bit, a lot of fear. I'd never been on my own again. And even though I was moving out with a friend, it wasn't the same as my own family, right? And so I asked my father to talk to my mother to see if maybe I could come with them, right? And and it took a couple of weeks for that answer to get back to me, but when it did, it was a yes, right? And I didn't care that it was meant to make me feel bad, make me feel nervous, stressed in that wait to get the answer. But, my parents, they hopped a train with my youngest sisters and they went to Winnipeg, and me and my other sister Tracy, we flew in a couple of weeks later. Uh yeah, we moved back to Vancouver, me and my sister Tracy. We stayed for about a year. Then I came back to to Winnipeg because I was so worried about my father. I loved my father. I knew he didn't have much time left, and I wanted to be with him when he passed away. I didn't want to be home, but I wanted to be with my father. By the time I got home, they had purchased a condo, and there really wasn't any room for me anyway in that house. And so I took a nanny job, a housekeeping job. It was a nanny job, but to keep myself busy, right? I did some housekeeping. I learned to cook, right? And it was a job that I had for a couple of years. I didn't care for it. It was stressful for me because it wasn't my property. I felt like I was a guest in somebody else's home because I was a live-in nanny. And from the very beginning, I didn't want to be there. But I didn't know whether or not I was going to have an opportunity to get another job. I was in the job. I had a roof over my head. I was making good money, right? And at the same time, that room and board that I was paying was so minimal that I was saving, and but I didn't like it. After a couple of years, I remembered, I went to talk to my father about it. I says, I don't think I can do this anymore. But by that time, because I grew up in guilt and shame, that's what was stopping me from quitting this job because I knew this couple needed me. They had just had another baby, and he was a pretty famous scientist, and she had a esthetician, right? She had a shop. It's like a beauty store, but it's for skin and nails and stuff like that, right? And so I was really kind of scared about telling them that I didn't want to be there. Her husband, right? He was pretty alpha. He was pretty alpha. Like I was a little bit intimidated by him, to tell you the truth. She was a lovely lady, but both of them worked very hard. They had a couple of children, and I was attached to them, but I was very disattached. I felt very trapped in their home, and so uh, I had to have a sit down, and I had to be very strong in that because, wow, the way, right? They were determined that I was not going to go anywhere. And they used every resources, whether it was a raise, it was building me a suite in the basement, it was talking to my father and trying to get my father to talk me into staying. And I had to stay stubborn. I had to escape once it had come out of my throat to say, I can't do this. I can't be here anymore. It was a done deal. I had gotten through the worst of it, right? You got to overcome your fears. It's sometimes in that moment that we freeze, when sometimes it's in the guilt and shame because, oh my goodness, I felt so terrible for doing it to that family, right? And it didn't matter the explanation I wanted to give to them. They really didn't care because they were just looking out for their own family. And I understood that, right off the hop. And that just made me more determined to get away. I had saved a little bit of money, got enough money together for an apartment. Um, and it was incredible, to move into my own place. It was the beginning of me living my own life. Uh, it was a time when I was starting to be social. I had learned to make friends a little bit. It took some practice. And again, in that people pleasing, right? I was able to make some friends, right? And, whether or not they were true friends, I can't say it all. Hello, Eugene. I hope you're having a good night too. Thank you very much. Thank you. Uh, yeah, and in my few experiences in gaining friends, I came to understand that if I gave in that relationship, that I had a better chance at being around people that I wanted to emulate. For the most part, that's what it was. I saw they were having this fun. I was looking at their lives and their boyfriends, and I wanted to be a part of that. And they call it mirroring, right? And that's exactly what I did. And I didn't understand what I was doing at the time. It's only until recently, and then looking back at my past, that I can really understand how much I catered to others. you know you might relate to this a little bit if you are highly sensitive, if you are empathic, that lots of times they call it people pleasing, right? And I talked a little bit about this week, and that is the lack of confidence that we can live on our own, that we can create a life for ourselves that probably doesn't have to evolve around other people once you start getting into it like I did in the beginning, in those younger years, because you have hopes and dreams, right? And I did myself, of getting married and having babies and having a career, that we put a lot of energy into that social part of our lives, because those are our goals, those are your dreams. How do you get there without moving through that? So you do what you have to do in that. But when you're in that and you're doing what you have to do and you're in that people pleasing and stuff, you get to really understand what it means to make friends. I got to understand the impact of who I was, what was going on with other people in that relationship with me. And I think it was probably the first time I recognized my value, that I started to learn that I didn't necessarily have to people please. And it was just a matter of getting yourself in the right group. Surprisingly, I did get myself into a really amazing group that introduced me to, oh my goodness, so many things. We're talking concerts and parties and camping and socials and just sitting around and enjoying just being myself, because this is what this group, it was a fairly large group. It's just started with me and one other person, and slowly, right, people joined in until, oh my goodness, 6 years in, this group stuck together for a very, very long time. We were probably, looking back now, I would have to say, for the most part, we were empaths and narcissists. And to be honest, it was the men who were the empaths, and it was the women who were the narcissists. And the guys I hung out with, they kind of like that domination, that kind of, let me tell you how it's done or what I need you to do. And it was kind of, I don't know, it just kind of ended up being kind of a hookup, not like hookup in sex kind of thing, even though all of that was going on. But it was my girlfriends, right? Meeting their boyfriends and their future even my own sister, Carolyn, married within that group, married my one of my very best friends, and I'm so grateful. I talked about Ian yesterday. I phoned my sister today only because I wanted to remind her it was my other sister's birthday. We tend to forget dates of birthdays, and it's a big no-no in forgetting a member of our family's birthday. But I phoned her just to remind her, just in case she forgot. And we started talking. I remembered saying yesterday that John Travolta was in Winnipeg making a movie, and because my brother-in-law is an actor, he does a lot of stand-in work and stuff. And so I phoned my sister to find out if he was in the John Travolta movie that's being filmed here in the city. And she says, "Oh, he mentioned something about John Travolta, but I don't remember him saying that he was in the movie. But in this moment, he's filming somewheres in the city. So I'm assuming that he is going to be in that John Travolta movie, which is pretty exciting." And then in that conversation, my sister told me that they've been watching him in these movies. I don't watch TV. It's been a long time since I've watched a movie, right? I'm a YouTube girl, 100%. And I'm mindset. I'm deep in the lessons, and I'm making movement for myself, and I'm making movement for my family. I'm just preoccupied. I don't know if I could sit through a whole movie. I probably could. It's been so long since I seen a movie. I probably will really, really enjoy it. There was actually an advertisement for a movie today, a remake, a Stephen Running Man, right? Oh my goodness. I remember that movie, Running Man, with Arnold Schwarzenegger. And it looks like they have done another remake of that movie. And it looks really good. It looks really violent. But, you know, in remembering that movie, Running Man, I remember that it was set way into the future. And, you know, uh, I love innovation, and I love the idea of us second guessing what the future's going to look like. If you were born in the 60s or 70s, you might remember the cartoon, the animated. It wasn't even a kid's cartoon. Well, I guess it was a kid's. It was more for the teenagers, I think. But the animated show was called The Jetsons, and it was all set in the future, right? And you look at him, and he had a big monitor sitting on his desk. And this was in the 60s and 70s, you guys. Monitor on the desk, just like the monitors we have now with our computers, and talking like on Zoom with his boss, or being at work and phoning home to his wife. The personal little spacecrafts that they had for getting from point A to point B. Now, don't forget, what about the maid? Now, I can't remember what the maid's name was on Jetsons, but she was a robot, right? And they were already like, it makes me curious, in all honesty, as to the person who created the concept for the show. Because to me, that's somebody with insight. That's somebody who can foretell, right? And so when I see these shows that kind of project into the future, it makes me curious. It's like my movies here. You can't see them here. I'm just going to grab a few so that you can see. These are books and videos that are very important in my life. And if you have an opportunity to zoom in on them, right? Maybe you'll get a little insight on me or something. Maybe not. I am an ice age. This is only a few. This is only a few of them. And there's a couple that I haven't seen yet. And I've been waiting for them to come in thrifted. But I think I'm ready just to buy them already. Maybe I'm not ready yet because, again, I'm busy doing other things. But you wouldn't think, and we're just going to stop here because I need to send some good cheer to the fire truck and some good cheer to their destination, that they're going to get to their destination. It's going to be a false alarm and they're going to turn around and go right back to the station. All right? Have a good night. Okay, they're gone now. So you wouldn't think that in any way this is innovation, except for the fact that it's a DVD, right? And that's about as close as it can get. Or is it? It is in the creative mind, because even though this is set during the Ice Age, right? It doesn't mean that this can't be a part of our future. The message within this series, Ice Age, I didn't know I was going to go here. The insight that comes from these movies, right? The Ice Age, my favorite movies. You ask me what my favorite movie is, I'm going to say Ice Age, right? I just love the movies. And why I love it so much, maybe that's not a good example, but let's pull out a different one. Okay, let's pull out a different one. There we go. There's a little bit. There's Scat. He's my favorite character. The seed. He's saving the acorn. In every single one of the Ice Age movies, the first 10, 15 minutes is just a scene of him saving the acorn, chasing the acorn, right? Because it keeps getting away from him. But what made this so special to me was the fact that it was the Ice Age, and it was a mishmash of all different types of characters. It takes all kinds to make the world. That, with the Ice Age coming, that they became a family, even though none of them were truly related except his wife, and then in the later editions their baby, right? But it's so amazing. And take a look at this one, right? Like, it's a family. It's a family, and yet they're so different. And they came together. Why? To survive, because they knew they couldn't get by without each other. Each one of them came each one of them came with a gift, right? Each one of them added something to that group's survival. And so, yes, that is innovation, because it's not going to be our last Ice Age. We are actually still in the Ice Age. We are moving out of it now, right? We are global warming. We are warming up, but it wouldn't take much, would it? It would take a few volcanoes to go off and put that cloud in the sky so the sun couldn't break through to throw us into an Ice Age. Maybe it would be a meteorite, right? Again, hitting the earth and spewing it all up into the atmosphere, and then we would be right back into an Ice Age. It's, if you look at the charts, and they have scientific evidence, and they can actually see where these climate spikes have gone up and down, and they actually have, even in the Ice Age, have gone up and down, even in the global warming span, up and down. And if even you look back into year 536, the worst year in human known history that we know of, right? The volcanoes went off. It made everything black, right? That they couldn't grow crops. There was starvation, and plague. It was absolutely a horrid time, right? And again, it threw everybody into darkness and into the cold. Didn't Not into an ice age, right? But it did wreak havoc. I don't know why I got into that. I felt compelled. There you go. But it is, it's reading in to the gifts that people have. And again, right? I'd love to have a conversation with whoever, right, had the concept for this movie because it represents. Disney does the same thing, right? I don't know if anybody really looks into that, but Disney does the exact same thing with their movies because they're giving lessons in their movies. There are values, there is insight, there is foreshadowing, and there is a little bit of that insight into the future. And there's lots of content out there, right? That kind of reads into things, that way. And it's in that creativity of the person who had the concept, right? It's not the concept itself. Maybe it is because maybe that's the messaging that they felt compelled to put out to the world. But I believe in it, right? I believe in the messages, in the things that I am compelled to, that I am drawn to. And Ice Age is one of them, 100%. Okay, you guys, you know what we're going to do tonight? I'm just going to turn my air conditioner off here because my reservoir is now full. Like I said, we have been in the high 30 Celsius the past couple of days, right? We had a nice couple of cool days. I'm not complaining about that, but it was kind of nice not to have to change my reservoir today. Super hot, lots of humidity in the air. They did say thunderstorms tomorrow. They still kept that thunderstorm forecast in there, but when I went in, there's no rain tomorrow, right? It is in that. I guess you got to look into the future in that and look at these people and say, oh my goodness, maybe we need somebody like the person who made the Ice Ages, right? That little bit of insight into what's going on in the future. Maybe those are the kind of people that we need as weathermen, right? That can maybe take a good guess with the information that they have and get it right. Right? They're taking good guesses, but they're not getting it right at all, right? This weather, like if it says it's going to rain on the weekend, don't count that it's going to rain on the weekend. Don't cancel your campsites because more than likely, right? It's not going to rain. It's usually the way it is here. It's the way it always is. It's the one thing we can't control as humans. We have no control. Well, right? I'm not going to, we'll say it, right? This week is a good example, right? That we cannot dictate the weather. We have no say in what Mother Nature wants to dish out to us, right? That even in this year, 2025, we still don't have it down packed yet. And who's to say that we ever will, right? There was a big saying in the 60s and 70s, you can't fool Mother Nature, right? And sometimes I think when we try to fool Mother Nature, she gets kind of ticked and she shows us who's boss. And I don't mean to put it like that, especially after the week that we've had. My heart goes out, but wow, right? Again, this is why I feel bad when they're turning it into a kind of a political platform to take people out or to play pass the blame. Oh my goodness. And at the same time, in saying that, you know, we can't feel guilt and shame when it comes to Mother Nature because we have no control over that. It didn't matter what you could have or should have, right? Or would have done, right? It doesn't matter because it is what it is, and Mother Nature made that call, and there wasn't anything anybody could do. And I would hate to think that that blame becomes a blade, right, in somebody's ribs, somebody's life. And uh, everybody doing the best that they can. Everybody's doing the best. I've been in the floods a little bit today. Just I'm just praying that they just find one person even so that we could say this is a miracle. We never gave up, and because we never gave up, look at what happened. We saved this person. What a miracle. And put some bright into the world in a week that could really use a little bit of good news, right? And that's only one aspect that's going on in the world right now, but it's the only one that's coming across my path. And so that's the only one that I'm really paying attention to in the moment, right? Okay, so let's just pick a card tonight, okay? Keep it light. I went for a walk today and went for a cup of coffee. It was my first cup of coffee this week. It was absolutely amazing. I had to have two, and I got a walk in. It was super breezy, but it was super hot, and right, I was happy to come home, sit in the air conditioner. I didn't even want to cook dinner tonight, but I didn't have a choice. I didn't have anything that didn't need to be cooked, so I had to have the stove on for a little while. I really didn't want to, but it is what it is. Okay, you guys, it's the end of my night. I hope everybody is having an amazing evening. If you haven't started shutting it down yet. And if you're just starting your day, if you're on your way to work or you're just right getting the kids ready for their day or getting yourself ready for your own day, I hope it's amazing. I hope that everything runs smoothly, that there is no hiccups in your day, right? Or your family's day. A little bit for you and a little bit for those other parts of you, right? A little bit of what you need and a little bit of what you want. Okay, here we go. You still there, Eugene? We're going to pick a card now. Okay. Today's word. This actually came across my path today. Well, it's been coming across my path all week in this idea of forgiveness. What does it say? Forgiveness is a gift in its giving and its receiving. You know, in that guilt and shame, quite often we wear it, right? We wear that guilt and shame so heavily. And you know what? People notice that. People see it. They see it in the way we overcompensate, the way we do the people pleasing. Sometimes it's in the way we kind of stay out of the picture, right? Because we don't want to be reminded of that guilt and shame. I have to say that's a little bit in my life right now. But, right, in the lessons, we know sometimes we don't have much of a say in that. But do we? Right? With this word forgiveness, we can take the heaviness out of our lives. I know sometimes we think, oh my goodness, that person doesn't need to be forgiven, right? Forget that. What they did to me, what they did to so and so, right? It's it doesn't deserve to be forgiven. And I'm going to have to say, I lived this way for such the longest time, right? That I don't believe in turning the other cheek. I really don't. And if I see somebody being mistreated, whether it's myself or whether it's somebody else, that's where I usually get in trouble, is when I jump into somebody else's affair, when I see somebody being mistreated, that we end up stirring the pot and can quite easily make a bad situation worse. And when we hold these grudges inside, it's like venom. It's like infestation, right? And it just simmers and stews, and it grows. And then, you get a lesson across. Oh, you got to forgive. Okay, I forgive, right? But that really isn't forgiving. It's much better just to walk away if you're just going to apologize for somebody. Because my dad used to say all the time, there's no point in being sorry unless you know what you're sorry for, right? What are you sorry for? And if you are truly sorry, then you want to ask for that forgiveness for yourself. Sometimes in our guilt and shame, right? We can't bring ourselves to choke that up, to spit that up. And if we're lucky sometimes, that person that I always recognized when my father felt bad. Usually it was comic books, potato chips, and pop, right? But that's the way he said sorry. Lots of people don't know how to apologize. But I forgave because I knew it was not my dad's nature. I never heard my dad say sorry my entire life. I never, right? My dad was with me until I was 23 years old. He never passed away. So in those 23 years, he never once said sorry. But I forgave him readily in those small hiccups and those small mistakes that we all do, right? Sometimes out of fear, sometimes out of survival, sometimes it's out of, right? You don't want anybody to find out. So again, that's going to be fear. Maybe it's that guilt and shame again, right? But sometimes it needs the person being wronged to notice that in somebody. And I always noticed it, right? In the extra attention that my father gave me, right? Maybe it was an extra outing. Maybe it was a privilege that I got that I didn't normally get. Um, but I forgave. And I did ask him, right? How come you guys don't apologize? And all I ever got out of that was maybe a smile and a shrug. The smile because I recognized it, and the shrug was, right, don't worry about it, right? It's not something you need to worry yourself about. I got a lot of that I get a lot of it all the time. I ask these questions and I get these smiles and they get these shrugs and I go, there's something underneath that. And I read right into it. And sometimes we can pressure to find out what it is. Sometimes you just let it go, because that's what that shrug is just to say, don't bother me, right? I'm not going to say anything to you. So sometimes you do have to forgive. So when I so readily forgave my father, it's because I loved him so much. I knew my father's heart, and nobody could tell me differently. And even if he was the good cop, right? Even if he flubbed, even if he made mistakes, even in that nurturing that he didn't get it right, I readily forgave him anyway, like I said, because I understood his heart, that I knew that he just couldn't choke it up. He just couldn't spit it up in his sorries. So why couldn't I give that same consideration to my mother, right? The answer for me is very simple, because it was the same answer that I had for my father, because I knew my mother's heart. I don't know how, but I knew my mother's heart. And right? And this is where I get stuck. This is where I butt heads. This is where I can make frenemies, enemies. This is where I could become the target, is because I do see that, right? And I'm sure I'm not the only one that can do that, but that comes from my trauma. That comes from really reading and paying attention and being very hypervigilant in the person in front of me. And it's probably why I was able to make such good friends. Didn't have a lot of friends, but it's because I could feel out the hearts. And when I talked about that big group that I belonged to in the 80s, early 90s, it that the group had to dissipate because I got married, right? And I got pulled into a different experience again, a big change in my life that I had to adjust to, but I was so grateful for that experience, right? To And my husband was in the military, so I became a military wife. And the military is its own family, it's its own unit, and to be taken care of and accepted and kind of encompassed and contained in that beautiful group, I just kind of let the civilian friends go, and I moved into a different life. It caused me a little bit of problems in in when I broke up with my husband, right? We separated, because it's all I had were the military friends. I didn't have any civilian friends anymore. But in that group, that big group, going back, in that big group that we had, there were so many different characters, because even though it started out with just two of us, right? That two of us had family. So because we were pretty close to the same age, right? My sisters joined in the group, and my friend Brian, all his family, well, not all his family, his brother joined in on the group, and then their friends joined in, and then my friends joined in, and my sister's friend. By the time, there were so many people in this group. And when I say this group, this is a group that it was a little gang. We weren't a gang. We were grown adults. Half of us worked, half of us didn't work. It was probably a lot of rotation in that, and we all supported each other. But what I was going to say about that is this group was made up of empaths and narcissists. And yeah, it was a very comfortable group, a really healthy mix of all kinds. And you know my mission statement, it takes all kinds to make the world. So in those two groups, you can imagine narcissists and empaths together. I don't know. As empaths, you could swing different ways, right? In that you can swing in a borderline way, you can swing in a narcissistic way, very controlling way, in my case, a very hyper vigilant and peacekeeping, right? Fun, funny, right? Family oriented way. And I give credit to my father. I knew my father's heart. And because of that forgiveness that I so willingly gave when it wasn't even asked for, right? Uh, I was rewarded in that. And now as an adult, I better understand those lessons of my father, right? I better understand them, but I also better understand the lessons of my mother. And you can be sure that she had just as many lessons for sure, and lots of extra ingredients, if I have to say so myself. So when I so readily forgave my mother or my father, why couldn't I do that for my mother? Why couldn't I do that? Because I read her heart just as much as I read my father's heart. And being singular in that, uh, I had a different experience than everybody else did. And I didn't know it at the time. There really wasn't much point in saying anything or pointing anything out because I was the only one besides my father who saw it or knew it, right? I thought commercial fishing was my dad's dream job. But I think one of the reasons that it was one of his dream jobs is so that he could get away from the borderlines and the narcissists. Okay, you guys, now that I'm trailing off, a little bit of forgiveness. Forgiveness is a gift in its giving and its receiving. I can forgive my mother now. I have forgiven my mother. I forgave my mother, unfortunately, right, the night before she passed away. We settled things, and that forgiveness was wholeheartedness. And in a way, it did break my heart, but it broke my heart in a way because it could have been done sooner, right? It could have been done sooner. We could have repaired that relationship, right? My mother has moved on. She is. And I suspect that my mom is back, right? As fast as my sister could shed a tear for her, or all my sisters could shed a tear for her passing, she was back already. I could almost guarantee it, right? I offer my mother that forgiveness because I didn't see her story. I didn't read her story in that. I read her heart, right? And I could feel the disdain. But because I didn't understand it, it was painful, it was demeaning, and I felt really rejected by that. And that's a terrible feeling to have as a child, of somebody that you really, really, right? You need both your parents, and that's a truth, and that's a conversation for another day because, right? I want to talk about this singularly raising children. It's causing lots and lots of issues, causing so many issues. The kids growing up and the kids who have grown up in this generation anyway, because it has been a topic of conversation, right? That I do believe that we are working towards possibly making something that could have been devastatingly crucial to our even existence, right? That accidental childness. And maybe we could put something back together if we could put those partnerships back together, understanding that I think we truly do need the two extremes, right? I had two parents on the extremes of opposite spectrums for sure. And I was in the middle of that and the experiencer in that. But how would we know what was not going right unless we have that other example, right? That mother who's going to work and trying to put a roof over her kids' head, and she's not only being the mother but she's being the provider, she's being the man of the house, right? That's children growing up with the perspective of one parent with nothing else to compare it to, right? We do have grandparents and aunts and uncles, right? You can get a little bit of different perspective in that way, but only a little bit because culturally and traditionally, these things are passed down from one generation to another, right? If one parent's like that, I suspect that the parents of that person is going to be very similar to that. Or if they're both, right? They'll be the both extremes and it'll be a mixture of both. And if that's the case, this word forgiveness is so crucial. And again, you hear people say you forgive for yourself. That's 100%. That's 100% true. You have to forgive for yourself because if you don't forgive for yourself, like I said, it's going to fester, right? If my mother had passed away and I had not forgiven, and if she hadn't been able to do the same with me, that that would have eaten me. Guilt and shame. That was a big one for me, and I couldn't imagine the work that I would have to do to be able to crawl out of that bucket. And I want to stop saying crawl out of that bucket because in order to crawl out of a bucket, you're crawling on somebody's head to get out of a bucket. So I'm going to move away from saying that anymore because I don't want to move forward at the expense of anything or anyone else, right? And I have done that, and I hope that in my expression of asking for forgiveness, that it might be bestowed upon me. I'm tired. I'm going to bed. Everybody, have a great night. If you're just starting your day and you're just driving to work or getting the kids ready to go to school, oh no, school's out, isn't it? I didn't have kids. I don't care. I don't pay attention to these dates only because, well, it's summertime. We're right in the middle of the heat. It was the only thing that came to my mind is, oh my goodness, there's no kids in school, right? But if the kids are at home, I hope you're having an amazing day and they're not driving you too crazy. Okay, you guys, have a great night and we'll see you tomorrow.